Yeah, that's the question that we are going to answer today, which is more easier for express entities. Let's start comparing the two exams, module by module. Reading test, which is in French called as compréhension écrite. For TEF Canada, let's first discuss TEF Canada. It's of 1 hour duration, 50 multiple choice questions with only one correct answer, no multiple correct answers, no negative marking. Awesome. So this is how it looks like, more or less. Your reading, comprehension écrite. 50 questions, as I said, all MCQs. First 13 questions are fairly easy based on short documents like advertisements, graphs, public notices, or invitation cards. So, for example, this is a public notice, right, for parking reserved for handicapped people. Or you can see this is a public notice at a beach, promenade à cheval sur la plage. So it's a very, very small document, notice for les horaires. So these are very easy, fairly easy to read. As you can see, after question number 3, for one notice, you will have multiple questions. Here are 2 questions based on the same picture. This is the invitation card. You have 1, 2, I think 3 questions will be there on this same image. Yeah, there are 3 questions for the same image. There's a reason why I'm going through this super quick. Now I'll tell you, because we're going to compare this with TCF. So after 10th, 11th is a statistical table. And then you have, I think, 3 more questions based on the same. Okay. So first 13 questions are based on these short documents, like some statistical tables or graphs or public notices or ads. So fairly simple. Most of the time, if you have, intermediate level, like close to B2, you will get 13 out of 13 correct. From question 14 to question 35. So next, so 3 questions each for 2 paragraphs, so 6 questions, and 4 questions each for 4, so 16 questions. So next 22 questions in the reading, they are based on paragraphs. Now at the beginning, as you can see for the question number 14, the paragraphs are fairly simple to read and fairly short in length. So there will be 3 questions on this. There will be another paragraph for 3 questions. For example, let's see, this is the next paragraph. Now, as you can see, the length of the paragraph has increased a bit, and also the complexity. It's not as simple to read as the previous one. So there will be another 3 questions on this. And then from question number 20, we'll have more difficult, not necessarily longer, but more difficult paragraphs. And now you'll have 4 questions based on each paragraph. Okay. Next is another paragraph, which is again slightly longer in length and more complex to read. So eventually we stop after 6 such paragraphs back to back. Okay, from question 14 to 35, you have 6 paragraphs back to back. First couple of them are fairly easy. They have 3 questions each, and the next 4 paragraphs are fairly complex with 4 questions each. So we reach till this point. Then from question number 36 to 40, we have these 5 questions. If you go here, 36 to 40, they give us this paragraph, again a paragraph, and they have some missing sentences, okay, like 5 missing sentences. And you have to choose from the options for these questions what's the correct missing sentence at this position for 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. So these are the 5 questions where you have to choose the correct sentence at the correct missing position from the options that are given. Okay. Then from 41 to 45, next 5 questions are about arranging the sentences to form a meaningful paragraph. So you will be given 4 sentences. You have to arrange them in a proper order to create a meaningful paragraph. Okay. So these are 5 questions. Fairly simple. First 2, 3 are fairly simple, and last 2 are slightly difficult, but more or less fairly simple. Then we go from question number 46 to question number 50, the last 5 questions. These are more like they give you a sentence and you have to guess from the options, from the 4 options, which of these options are of the same meaning of that of given statement or given sentence. For example, Linda part à Genève. So Linda is going to Genève or Geneva in English. So basically it's a synonym, similar in meanings. Couple of them are easy and then couple of them are more difficult. And that concludes your reading test. So that was a general structure. This reading test for TEF Canada, time management can be a bit of an issue, especially if you take too much time in reading this 6 paragraphs that we are talking about. But sometimes they can be very long and sometimes they can be very difficult to understand. So you have to be smart, and we'll talk about the tips and techniques for these topics another session, in a specific session dedicated to reading test. That's one challenge, time management. Because there are back to back paragraphs, six, it can be very boring to concentrate. As a countermeasure for that, first 13 questions and last 10 questions are fairly easy, right? So you can actually start first 13, then go to the last 10, and then come back just to, get rid of that morosity. You don't have to go through all the paragraphs at once, something like that. So you can change the order, because you can go from one sentence to another in reading test. Like you can solve first 13, go to, question number 41, then come back or something like that. So only 21 questions are relatively difficult out of 50. 29 are fairly easy. Okay, first 19 and last 10 are fairly easy, but rest 21 are relatively difficult. But see, out of 50, we are talking about 29 relatively easy. And based on our estimate, you need to get, for safety purpose, 40 plus correct out of 50. So these 29s are your good bet, and then you have to get about 11 correct from 21, which is not such a difficult thing. All in all, it's fairly easy exam, TEF Canada Reading. Now let's go to TCF Canada Reading. It's again 1 hour duration. Instead of 50, we have 39 multiple choice questions, only one correct answer. So no multiple correct answers, no negative marking, which is similar to TEF Canada. Now, this is one thing that has been asked a lot. As you are aware, for both exams, you have grading point out of 699 points. For in TEF Canada, that is for 50 questions. In TCF Canada, that is for 39 questions. So obvious question is, how many points are given for each question? So it's not that straightforward, because for sure, as we discussed earlier, for TEF Canada, some questions are more easier than other. So level of difficulty is different for different questions. So obviously it makes sense that they have different weightage. Some questions are of A1 level, some questions are of B1 level, some questions are of B2 level. So it doesn't make sense to give equal points to each question. And that's definitely true. Unfortunately, on the official websites of this exam, they have not disclosed this kind of weightage distribution of questions. This image that you see here, this is for TCF Canada. This has been obtained on a not official, non-official website or source. So you can look at it, you can take a reference out of it, but it's not confirmed because it's not from the official website of the exam or official document from the institute that conducts the exam. Same thing is applicable for TEF Canada also. You do not have the information available publicly by the official institution. You will find some similar images for TEF Canada also, but it's up to you if you want to believe this exact information. But it's close to reality, because as you can see here for TCF Canada, first few questions have 3 points, then 9 points, then 15 points, then 21 points. Eventually, last 4 questions have 33 points each, which makes sense because as in TCF Canada, the level of difficulty increases as you go from question 1 to question 39. So that is along the lines, but we are just not sure if this is the exact thing that they do. But you can use this for planning. Another way that we advise for TEF Canada is get 40 plus right out of 50, and more or less your CLB 7 is secured. Okay, so now that was the TCF Canada basic. Now let's go and look at the TCF Canada. How does it look like? Okay, so as you can see, there are 39 questions. First few questions are fairly easy. This looks like a SMS, short text messages, and you have to answer some simple questions. So I think first 4 are just like that, short messages, which is very similar to what we had in TEF Canada. One noticeable thing here though is, as you scroll through these questions, is for every question they have different document. So unlike in TEF, where even at the beginning, right from question number 3, you had 2 questions on one document. Okay, whereas here you have, for each question you have separate document, whether it's a small postcard or SMS, whatever it is, but it's different document for each question. That's a major difference between reading test of TEF Canada and TCF Canada. And that also explains why there are only 39 MCQs in TCF Canada, whereas there are 50 MCQs in TF Canada. Let's go back here. First 10 questions, small text, emails and announcements, fairly simple. From question 11 to 39. Now, this is where it gets a bit trickier. Till question number 10, it's smaller document, one question per document. But from question number 11, they start giving you paragraphs basically. It turns to paragraph based exam now. But even when they start doing that, still one question per per document. So you can see fairly simple, like fairly shorter. And by the time you go somewhere in the middle, they will start getting more complicated to understand for sure, and probably also a bit longer to read. And that is where I think TEF is slightly better because you're not reading one document for one question in TEF, whereas in TCF, you're reading one document for one question. Look at this. This is fairly long document for one question. And then as you go along, as you progress, the paragraphs become not necessarily greater in length, but they become difficult to understand, more or less. And when you reach up to last few questions, not only they are bigger, slightly bigger, they're also more difficult to understand. Okay, so they're gonna be, because they carry more weightage, of course. You got the idea of what these two exams look like, reading part of TEF Canada and TCF Canada. Let's discuss pros of TCF, less number of questions. We have 39, whereas in TEF we had 50. Cons, too many paragraphs to read, can be tiring. There we had like 6 paragraphs back to back. Here we have, a lot more. So time management is more tricky than TEF Canada for TCF. So let's compare very quickly these two exams for reading. Duration same, number of questions 50, 39, but don't go on this because as we said, one document, one paragraph can have multiple questions. Also, as you remember in the TEF, we also have variety of questions. For example, we had questions where they were giving us sentences and you just had to guess the meaning, the correct meaning from the options. So those were the 5 questions. Then you have ordering of questions, 5 questions. So, like there were questions which were not based on paragraph, like first about 10 questions and then last 20 questions were without paragraphs, more or less. Okay, so only 30 questions were sort of based on paragraphs. So this number is kind of like, don't go basically just like because it has more questions it's more difficult. It's not like that. No negative marking. Number of paragraphs of significant length, I'm saying, not those small text messages. Number of significant paragraphs to read are 6 in TF Canada, whereas in TCF it could be 25 plus. Time management is tricky, not easy, but here is definitely it's much more trickier than most non-paragraph questions are fairly easy. And most paragraphs, even though it has more paragraphs than TEF Canada, they are more easier to comprehend in general than the ones in TEF. But TEF has only 6. So most of them are easier than this 6, but there are some which are equivalent in difficulty to these ones. So that's the general comparison of reading module in TEF Canada and TCF Canada. Now, having done all this, let me provide a conclusion. In my opinion, and based on my discussion with students who have given both exams, some students have given that, some students have given this, and some students have given both. There's no significant advantage of choosing TCF over TEF or vice versa for reading. Both are fairly easy to crack. Having said that, TEF reading is slightly more better structured. There is slightly more variety to questions. Like some questions are just ordering, some questions are synonyms. So it's easier in comparison to TCF. So in my opinion, TEF Canada reading test is slightly more easier than TCF Canada. Either it's for time management or level of difficulty, but the difference is not significant. That's my opinion. Now it can differ from person to person, as I said. For example, somebody hates reading paragraphs. So there are too many paragraphs to read in TCF Canada. So probably that person will prefer this. Somebody doesn't mind reading so many paragraphs. Somebody has a very good concentration power. So maybe they will prefer TCF Canada to TF Canada because there are less questions. So it becomes now preference, matter of preference for people. So my job is to give you information, but at the end of the day, having all this information, you can decide for yourself, at least when it comes to reading, which one is preferable for you. So there's no clear cut answer, but according to us and based on our discussion with students, TEF Canada reading is slightly easier than TCF Canada. And please follow us on our social media channels in order to remain updated about our program offerings and make most of all the information that we like to share with you about French, about Canadian immigration programs, and how to best prepare for TEF and TCF Canada exams. Merci beaucoup.